Hey, I'm Pops, and welcome. Comic book talk. Yeah, a little shorter, a little more lean, a little more compact. That's okay. X-Men Fatal Attractions, 30th anniversary. It's kind of hard to believe that this was done to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the X-Men in 1993, and now it's been 30 more years. And I thought to myself, are we going to have a revival at some point, maybe, or we're going to have a way of kind of seeing things recalibrate because so many things happened in 1993. I thought about doing a series of these, like where I can just kind of look at a story arc. And I wanted to show you this only because I want to make sure you see the hologram that these were like these gimmick books. There's, 5 in the story. And there's a lead up by if you get the trade paperbacks, guys, they're sort of like flushed out with several other issues. So Fatal Attraction, the core story, um, is X Factor 92, X Force 25, Uncanny X Men 304, X Men 25, Wolverine 75, and then Excalibur 71. So that's your core story. Read a trade paperback, you'll have a lot more issues than that. That's pretty much the gist. But they all have these cool holograms. But yeah, it is definitely a gimmick. If you're not a core diehard X Men fan, let me say this: the story is not, it reads a lot more complicated than it is. Um, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a dose of some of the things that you can expect. So, for instance, let me hop over here and show you from one of the trades. Has some of the trade pulled up here. One thing you're going to find, this is Uncanny Week 298. So this will be part of your one of your trades. I wanted you to see the art. I wanted you to see just how well and detailed everything is, right? Just beautiful work. Beautiful, beautiful work. Scott Lobdell's doing the writing. The Brandon Peterson's doing the art on this issue. But I wanted you to see, look at Bishop, right? Look at the way the panels move and draw you through this story. There's Jean, Archangel, Gambit. You have so much motion, so much detail. Look at them face one another, right? I think what's interesting is that so much of this centers around the fact that people remember what happened more so than they do like the story, like the fact that this story is about Magneto. He's creating, basically calls it Avalon. He's trying to create basically a mutant utopian, right? And he's recruited different X-Men to join him. And in doing so, Colossus actually leaves the X-Men. But more importantly, we do get Exodus. And Exodus comes up later, but it's important to understand that. And you have sort of a movement across the X titles, some conflict with the Acolytes, and then you move into the X Force conflict. And the X Force conflict is really, to me, very underrated because that's when I felt like this is serious. This is gonna get serious. So here we have this this issue. And let me go back up here to the top. Again, the art is just next level, right? Next level. Magneto talking to them, calling them the children of the atom, talking about which one he's going to recruit. He kind of gives them an ultimatum. They don't have a lot of direction right now in this point of the story. And you have it kind of moving. Look at this action sequence where they're attacking. Just beautiful, beautiful work in this book. And what you end up finding is we have Cable comes back. I love they have Ouchmaker down on the gun. So 90s. Everything is so ridiculous 90s. So yeah, Greg Capullo's done the artwork. So it's just beautiful work. But obviously I want to get to the end here because I want to get to where this, look at this, look at how this is drawn to have this incredible contrast with Cable. The seriousness and the gravity of the situation, dealing with Exodus, and then ultimately having to face off against Magneto himself is just done really well. It just sort of just keeps going and getting heightened towards that conflict before it gets just incredible action sequences and that kind of thing. And it's just really, really good. I don't always care for how Cable's drawn, but when he faces off against Magneto, this is top notch. Look at how it's total 90s pose right here, right? And he's kind of like saying the stuff out loud. He says, "You don't get it, do you? They haven't chosen to follow my path anymore. I've chosen to follow theirs." And it's like we're on gearing up for a head on collision. And they have their battle, but it gets really ugly right here. Look at him. He uses his powers to basically like take Cable out. Basically, he's barely alive, right? Pulled him apart. And look, they like blacken out his face. He's just, he's a mess. And he says, "I'm not a machine. I'm a man who just beat you because X Force is mine, Magnus, and you've lost them for good." Meaning, they're not going to follow you now, Magneto. Look what you did to me. And they left him for rubble. And it set up the story for you to know that Magneto is so unhinged. It's just not going well. There's like the UN is involved with what's called the Magneto protocols. Professor Xavier wears like an exoskeleton so he can contribute as well. They got to figure out a way to get to Avalon and stop Magneto. And they use the Shi'ar teleportation device to get there. And again, this leads to the conflict with Colossus because of things. And when they one up Magneto and you have Magneto basically being impaired, but you also have so much more in this with this character development with what ends up happening. And I think it's sometimes we forget because we know the story's been around for 30 years. We forget what it was like seeing that for ourselves the first time, right? Because most people will remember that it happened, but you have to remember what it would be like for those of us who didn't know what was going to happen. We see this cover. You think you know what's going to come. And then when you get there, it's it's almost like a bigger deal or worse than you expected it to be. If that's kind of a way to look at it. The wraparound cover teases it. You have all this setup. You have all this getting there, right? You even have a little look at the Fantastic Fours even involved because the stuff with Magneto's out of hand, right? Here you go. Here's your money page, right? With Andy Kubert doing the team. But look at that. Gosh, it's so good. I miss these days. Gosh, it's so engulfing, so immersive with so many dynamic elements with all of it. So they got to go face off and get the upper hand. But he is out of control, powerful, and Magneto doesn't waste any time. He's like, "Okay, Logan, we dance the dance again and again, and you'll never learn the steps very well. I'll have you." And he just uses his powers on Wolverine. So start attacking, and it gets ugly. Just gets ugly, and then Magneto's getting the one up on him, but each one of them is taking their shots, knocking the helmet off, getting the best of them the best they can. But he's very, very powerful and out of control. And Wolverine is going to basically try to run him through. Wolverine's like doing it, going to just run him through. And Magneto almost like just loses it right here. And even here, you don't quite get it. Like I remember turning the page and was like, okay, I'm just reading, just enjoying it. But then look at how they set this up where you have the close up shot. It's like, no, Magnus, for the love of God, don't. And he's like, now. And he's just out of control. And he's literally pulling the adamantium out of Wolverine. Wolverine doesn't scream, indeed. He doesn't even have time, as the adamantium, which long ago was bonded to its very bones, is destabilized on a molecular level, ripped from its moorings and forced through his open wounds, erupting outward like a water bursting through a dam. As he falls, the stillness of pure horror surrounds the killing ground, broken only by the voice of one person who has, since the day she first met him, and perhaps always will, love him. Jean yells out Logan. And he's just a shadow. He's just nothing there. And they don't even know if he's alive. And then Xavier strikes. But no one talks about that. We talk about this. And when it happened, you're like, did they just kill Wolverine? What did they do? Did they what it was so it was so intense. And this is what people will remember. I know a lot of people do. This is a famous shot of Xavier doing on Magneto what needed to be done. But so if you want to go back, it's called Fatal Attractions. 30 years ago. Gimmick covers with holograms on them and Wolverine having its animation. I mean, this stuff was such a big deal. It made it into like there were special trading cards and insert cards, things like that. Big deal. A lot of fun. Miss those days. So we thought about that. I thought about 30th anniversary stuff. And I thought about like the biggest stuff from the 1993 year. And kind of shocking how good it was. It really is. Like, I don't want to be the one to have to tell everybody, but there's some freaking great stuff. Came out. Venom Lethal Protector was a huge deal. You have to remember, everything is kind of gone crazy over what has happened with Image, right? Because Spawn and all these titles that they've had have taken off so well that this is Venom. This red foil. It's like a card stock. It's real thick. The crease is easy to mess these up. It's a limited 6-part series starting in February. Beginning of the year, this book drops, and you basically get this book that introduced so many symbiote characters and inspired the Venom films, but they don't do it justice. They can't. They refuse. They're not going to do rated R. Look at this. Venom has this guy by the throat and just taking care of business in this crazy graphic way. And it elevated Venom even more than he already was. He's already become so popular in the black suit era and stuff like that. But more than that, it was more like, what else could they do with it? What else could they do that could remotely be interesting? And what they did was just keep adding more layers to the mythology. Just keep giving it more. Mark Bagley did the art, and it's great. David Michelini he's the preeminent writer on Venom. Like he's the co-creator with McFarlane, and he's got it down. It's truly spectacular. So we get Spider-Man in the series, the miniseries. But more important than that, you get all these other characters, you get all these new elements to the story. And you're sort of like, I don't know where there's an end. So let me pull this up real quick so you can kind of see that there's, the other 5 Venoms, basically. Here you see Spidey seeing them for the first time, right? And they were going for this a little bit, in the movies, but they weren't doing it any justice, right? So it's like you get all this stuff, 5 enemies with the power of venom and carnage. Maybe I should have stayed in New York. And they're basically attacking him. And they're coming to impale him. They're coming to get him. And it's very, very fun and dynamic and interesting. And it also is elevating the character to whole new levels. So that's also 1993. Um, more than that, more than just about anything, to be honest, because it starts in 93, is Batman Nightfall. Batman Nightfall. And there's really only one thing to kind of show you, really. I mean, there's more, but reality is there's just one thing. That's what people remember. But this story went on for weeks. It was so good. And you ended up with this premise of all these criminals getting out and just wearing Batman out, Bane getting in there, and this took us by storm. Because I was reading Batman every single issue, Batman Detective, Legends, Shadow of the Bat. I was down with everything, every single issue during this time frame. And this was all building somewhere because you knew you had the little bat symbols at the top. And then you kind of knew, and there were rumors, but I try to always stay clear of spoiler stuff because I was really enjoying all this, right? And you know Batman's going to come back, but then they kind of pass the baton to, Batman 500. When you get a different Batman, the big foil cover thing, and you get some difference of, what is that going to mean? What is this? How long are we going to do with this? What do you mean? You gotta bring him back. Like, what are you doing? We're not going to not have Batman. Of course we're going to have Batman. I don't mean some knockoff Batman. I mean Bruce Wayne, right? So, I'm sorry, I clicked the button too many times. I'm trying to click the right cover. So when you guys see it, this is what we all went after. Foil embossed Batman 500 cardstock, 500th issue. We're going to get a different Batman. That's kind of what happened. We ended up with a Batman, right? We're going to kick off something different now with John Pavali. And you have a different sort of symbol up here with this. Now we're going to move into something else, right? And it is Night Quest, which continued. So Spider-Man has some cool stuff going on. We didn't even get to the other part of that. Sorry, I skipped it. I didn't even get into it. Maximum Carnage. We have to do a whole thing just on Maximum Carnage because it's 14 issues, I think. It was one of the biggest ones. So Batman had its going on. Superman had died, right? So now you have Reign of Superman. You have 4 Supermen. You don't know what's going to happen then when you're going to get him back. Maximum Carnage. Lethal Protector is introduced. Fatal Attraction is introduced. I am just pulling off the top of my head some of this stuff. Deadpool gets a miniseries. I didn't even dive into Amazing Spider-Man stuff that happened before, right? Amazing Spider-Man, 375, 365, these kind of issues, these iconic issues, just beautiful comic books, right? So awesome. So many crossovers and things. So Marvel just went boom. Daredevil, Man Without Fears, as a mini series that Frank Miller did, 1993. This is all 30th anniversary stuff. 30 years. You wonder why we love all this stuff. Trying to run through some of my notes, see what else I might have missed. Marvel was just dominating. They came back with a vengeance to get control away from what Image had done. And DC really struggled. They had the Batman breaking of his back, and they had Death of Superman, but nothing else really took off.
Yeah. Right?